Hello, and you're back with us again on The Movement, the politics show at The Citizen. And now today we're joined by ATM President Zungula, who's going to be telling us why South Africans should vote for the ATM. Of course, we know that Zungula is one of the most vocal parliamentarians that we have, and he represents a lot of young people in terms of how he speaks and how he sees things in the future and the future of this country. Sir, how are you today?
I'm all right, man, and how are you?
Great, thank you. Now, let's get straight into it. President Zungula, the ATM's not that old in terms of its years. What's the membership looking like?
We've not done a membership audit because the focus was preparing for these elections. So all of the resources that we have and preparations were focused on the 2024 elections.
Right. Now, to get straight into it, the ATM has great policies, some which speaks about putting South Africa first. But now there's been this criticism about how the ATM seemed to be, especially you, appearing at an EFF, a rally where, the EFF has perhaps different policies to you. How would you explain your presence there?
We as a party were not hostile to any party because we believe that all parties they state that they are there to service the people and they are there to make sure that, they improve the quality of lives of the people. So that is why we're not hostile. Secondly, we've always invited people or parties in our rallies. You remember in our 5th year anniversary in Gqeberha, we invited almost all of the parties. ACDP was there, even though we don't agree with ACDP on the Israel issue. UDM was there, even though we don't agree with UDM on certain issues. Similarly, we've been invited to many other parties, such as the EFF. We may not agree on everything, as parties, but what is important for us is that we must not be hostile to each other because we want to change the constitution as the ATM, and to do that requires a 2/3 majority. And you can't have a 2/3 majority to change the constitution if you're hostile to different parties. So that is why for us, it's all about understanding that, people must read the context. The context should be, if we as the ATM, we are having a certain position on an issue, if people agree with us on that issue, it is well and good. But that does not make us enemies with a party that that has got a different view on the same on a similar issue or on the same issue. So that is why, in that context, we as a party, we even attended the manifesto launch of the PAC over the weekend, precisely because we want to, create a friendly environment between parties so that parties can get to work together. So, but again, if you're to read some of the manifestos of these parties, well, I'm not here to speak about their manifestos, but for example, on the question of borders, they did, both parties that have attended the manifestos, they are also in agreement on the question of having stringent border controls, which is something that we as a party, we've always been calling for, that the borders must be secured. People that are in the country illegally must face the full might of the law and be deported. The companies that are creating illegal immigration by employing illegal immigrants, those managers and those companies employing the illegal immigrants must be charged and prosecuted and receive jail time. Even the companies themselves must receive hefty fines, and if need be, their licenses must be revoked. So we've not changed. Our manifesto is very clear, but however, what we cannot do as a party is to be hostile to different parties because we do not share the same views on some issues.
In terms of land policy, I know the EFF has what would appear as a radical land policy in terms of expropriation of land without compensation. Where does the ATM stand on that?
We believe that the government must be enabled to expropriate land without compensation and make sure that this land is returned to the people that the land was stolen from, because the land was not stolen from the government. The land was stolen from the kings. It was stolen from Amakhosi. So we believe that the land must go back to the original owners. That is what justice is. You can't, I can't steal land from you, but when it's taken from me, it is given to another person. The land must go back to the person the land was stolen from. So we believe in that, and we also believe that to enable the land to be used productively, the government must use the current land that it has now for productive purposes by ensuring that the people are encouraged to work the land, use the land, work on the land so that when the land expropriation becomes a reality, we've got the capabilities to actually work the land because we've utilized the current land that we have now in preparation for land expropriation without compensation.
There's been talks about a formation of a leftist wing in terms of South African politics, where people like the APC are in it, ATM apparently are in it, EFF, PAC in it. Is there such a formation that would counter the multi-party charter with the DA and other parties?
We've never been part of any discussion about the formation of the leftist wing. We've never been invited. We've never participated in such. But we do believe that parties that are like-minded need to work together. For example, the reason why we've got a big issue with the coalitions failing, especially in local government, is that they are not principle-based, they are not program-driven. It is a question of parties wanting to work together and allocate positions of MMC speakers, positions of power, instead of saying these are the programs that are required in order to be of service to the people and change the country towards a better direction. Now, if we as a party or the parties that are either in the councils or in parliament are program-driven, then any form of coalition is most likely to work because it must be the program that must lead any discussion on working together because the program puts the people first instead of having a discussion to say, you are going to be this minister, you are going to be this minister, but the people come last. In our view, the program must come first, and programs, most importantly, are driven by manifestos. So if we believe, for example, we as a party would say, any party that would want to work with us, they must agree in that, there needs to be strict border controls, the prioritization of citizens in the economy, there needs to be land expropriation without compensation, a skills-based education system, very tough on crime. So if we agree on those issues, then we can work well with any other party because for us, the programs lead a government that will put the interests of the people first.
Right. Now, we are entering a phase of coalitions. We don't know where this coalition might put the ATM. Who knows? You might be a Minister of Finance this year. But coalitions are important things. The ATM seems to be supporting the EFF-ANC coalition in the municipalities in Gauteng. We saw in the Ekurhuleni councils coming to blows with each other. What's your view on coalitions, how they should work, and how are you going to approach coalitions at a national level?
For us, it's a matter of principle. Principle meaning let's agree on what needs to be done for the country. That is what should be important and should drive the conversations on coalitions. And then once we decide or agree on what's to be done for in the best interest of the country, then we look at the skills and the capabilities, and we also look at the manifestos, because the manifestos, you may have in a manifesto of a certain party that's very strong on a particular issue. Then it is easier to say, okay, because party A is very strong on a certain issue, let them lead a particular department to implement what they've stated in their manifesto. Party B is strong on another issue. Let them lead because they've shown through the manifestos and they've shown through when it comes to the deliberations in terms of their policies, how they are much stronger on a certain issue. Then we allocate now the ministerial positions. Instead of saying, the point of departure is who gets to be president, who gets to be speaker, who gets to be what, because that is a flawed approach. The most correct approach is a program of action, look at the capabilities of the people, and then you decide who gets to do what, because the positions must come last. What must come first is what must be done in order to change things around for the people.
100%. Now, in terms of structures, inside the party, the ATM does not seem to have an LGBTQ plus I section of the party. We know the ANC has it, the EFF has it, other people have it. Why is that the ATM does not have it?
Look, as a party, we are still a growing party, so we can't have the things that, in some of the structures that older parties have. But we believe that we need to recognize and appreciate and protect all humans equally. We must not have a case whereby, there is a case whereby because of your sexuality you are treated differently in society or you are discriminated against in society. So that is why for us it becomes important from a human point of view. We must view each other as humans, because when you view each other as humans, then you can't discriminate against a fellow human being, especially because of sexuality. But what is important for us is that let us make sure that we drive a position that says respect people, acknowledge people, do not discriminate people based on their religious views, their sexual orientation, or their political views. All people must be respected and treated equally in our country.
And in terms of disabled people, they're also a minority. A lot of labor issues there with disabled people, them not getting jobs, them not having access to what would normally be accessible to someone with full control over their bodies. How's the ATM countering for those who are disabled?
In our manifesto, we've put in, certain targets to say, in line with some of our government policies to say, there needs to be a set quota or set targets for employment of people living with disability. We're of the view that what government needs to do is to enforce some of those targets, because you find that to a certain degree, the targets are there, but the implementation or the enforcement of those targets is not there. But we are very, very cognizant of the reality and the challenges that are faced with by people living with disabilities. So that is why we're of the view that they need to be protected, and there needs to be a conducive environment that allows companies and government departments to be able to employ employ people living with disability, so that people living with disability are not disadvantaged, they are not discriminated against because they are living with a disability.
Sure. You're still sitting with the movement. I've got ATM president here, Zungula. So he's still regaling us. So click, like, share, and let's talk about what the ATM is going to do for the country. Now, President, talking about your manifesto, what are your 5 best policies that you have to offer?
For us, what is critical is that we need to get South Africans to be economically active. When South Africans are economically active, you get to reduce poverty, you get to reduce unemployment. And by doing that, number one, you need to change the structure of the economy. Because the structure of the economy is, we've got an economy that is circulating or that is largely in the hands of very few individuals. That is why you find that there are oligopolies that are having a dominant presence in the market, and we do not have various players that are operating in the economy. So how we are proposing to do that is that the government spending must change towards small businesses, because small businesses, you are going to have a small business, for example, in East London, that is different from a small business that is in Ntlazeni, in Mpumalanga. However, when it comes to big business, you're going to have the same set of people that are benefiting. If you look at, for example, how Bidvest has got so many contracts in the government, and some of the contracts, you find that there's a contract of Bidvest of just a mere R1 million, whereas in our view, contracts that are below 10 million should be set aside for SMMEs. So that is the first thing that we're saying, that change the structure of the economy and make sure that SMMEs are protected and are prioritized by legislation for them to actually receive government contracts. That's the first issue. The second proposal is ensuring that we locally produce goods, because currently we are spending so much money importing things that we can produce here locally. We're importing umbrellas from the UK, we are importing sneakers from China, we're importing even basic goods such as toothpicks, whereas we should have the capabilities to produce such things. So in our view, we need to have a case whereby we produce goods locally in the country. That way we have a driving manufacturing in the country, whereby people are able to participate locally by these factories that are going to produce these goods. And these factories must not be centered in Johannesburg, because again, you find that majority of economic activities are centered either in Gauteng, in Durban, or Cape Town. So that is why you find that people from the Eastern Cape, leave Eastern Cape, come to Gauteng, from Limpopo, from Mpumalanga, almost all provinces, because they're in search of economic opportunities. In our view, once you've got these factories whereby in each district there must be factories that are producing local goods, it means you are going to have a case whereby goods, economic opportunities will be there for people in the different localities. And then we're also advocating that there needs to be a policy that says one household, one farm, or one household, one garden, whereby we farm in our respective households. That way we get to have a food security program that is based on the people, because that will reduce the food costs that we see now, because there's escalating food prices predominantly because there are few players, few farmers that are basically feeding our country. Whereas if we all produce food, in our respective gardens, emasimini in our gardens, it means we are going to be able to reduce the dependence on these few farmers. And again, the emerging farmers that are there, we are proposing a policy that is saying 50% of every produce of these retailers must be sourced from the respective farmers in that particular locality. In the context that if you go to Botswana or you go to Bloemfontein, the emerging farmers there, the retailers, whether it's Spar, Pick n Pay, Woolworths, whatever, they must source 50% of their local produce, of their produce from the emerging farmers in that locality. Because we learn from what Botswana has done. Botswana, for the longest time, has relied on South Africa for their produce, and to an extent whereby almost everything, their fruit and vegetables, were bought from South Africa. But as we sit now, 90% of the produce that is in the shelves of Botswana is produced by the farmers in Botswana. So we want to have something that is similar, whereby we create opportunities for the emerging farmers, instead of having a case whereby these farmers that are there are going to have a dominant share in the economy. And then the other policy that we're proposing is that when it comes to the issue of crime, all prisoners must work for the state for free. Because currently, if you have a daughter or a son and a criminal kills your child, that criminal goes to prison. Whilst they're in prison, it is you, the victim, that is going to pay for the livelihood of this person. Their 3 meals a day, their water and electricity, their free education is coming from your taxes. But what are they doing in return? Nothing. So we're of the view that we need to create an environment whereby these perpetrators, these criminals, are working for the state for free. We made even a suggestion to say we've got a problem in our country whereby some of the young girls cannot even go to school when they are on their period because of the lack of access to sanitary towels. Those criminals must produce sanitary towels, so that sanitary towels are also provided for free to every deserving or every girl that needs sanitary towels. There's a whole lot of other programs that these criminals can do so that they earn back their place in society. So those are part of our proposals. But critical to that is the transformation of the township economy, because the township economy is where majority of the most poor marginalized people live. So that is why of the view that we can't have townships that are the face of unemployment, alcohol abuse, poverty, and all of the social ills that we see. So that is why you are of the view that the transformation of the township economy, by making sure that whatever that is consumed by the people living in those townships has been produced by them in those townships, so that the money that they make gets to circulate amongst the people in those respective townships. Because currently, you find that if there's a Pick n Pay in a township, it's going to drain the money from the people in the township, and it's going to benefit one person or one family. If there's a foreign national that is operating a company or a spaza there, it's going to again drain the economy, because a foreign national that is coming from Pakistan immediately they get all of their profits, they send back to Pakistan, and the township economy does not grow. The community does not benefit from their own economy. So that is why we are very strict and we are very clear on saying the township economy must be transformed to have, first and most importantly, the citizens dominating all economic activities in the townships. Secondly, the products that are consumed in those townships must be produced by the people in those townships. And the other skills that are required in the townships must be encouraged by a skills-based education system, whereby we teach our learners skills so that our economy is linked, our education system is linked to the economy, in the context that we must not have an economy that, or education system that is so detached from our economy. We've got gold, we've got diamonds, we've got coal, we've got all of these minerals in our country. But you find that the education system is not training people to process all of these minerals, but it is just training people to be job seekers instead of people that can make a living based on on the minerals that we have in the economy. So those are the proposals that we're putting forward as a party.
Right. And then on the Zimbabwean issue, Zimbabwe is a neighbor to South Africa. We have seen how the Zimbabwean politics have affected countries around the SADC region. There are many Zimbabwean experts all over the world, probably within the range of millions. And now and then you get sporadic xenophobic clashes between South Africans and Zimbabweans, with people blaming the ANC for fumbling in terms of foreign policy with Zimbabwe. What's the ATM's view on Zimbabwe?
It's only Zimbabweans that can correct whatever that is wrong in Zimbabwe. Zimbabweans must be encouraged to go back in Zimbabwe and fight for the future of Zimbabweans. Zimbabweans must not be comfortable and be happy in leaving their country and going to all of these other countries, because what then is the future of their own motherland, their own country, which is Zimbabwe? If you look at what happened in Mozambique, whereby the people of Mozambique took to the streets and fought for Mozambique. Similarly, the people of Malawi did the similar thing years ago, whereby they fought for Malawi, for the future of Malawi. So if there's something that needs to be encouraged on Zimbabweans, is that they need to be encouraged to fight for, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe can never go anywhere if you have Zimbabweans that are proud on leaving Zimbabwe and, they are going to, emigrate to other countries, but they do not have the willpower to correct all of the wrongs in Zimbabwe. So the bottom line, only Zimbabweans can change Zimbabwe. Only Zimbabweans can alter the direction in which the Zimbabwe as a country is taking. However, there's this misconception that South Africans are xenophobic. South Africans are not xenophobic because, xenophobia is hatred. Now, if you are saying to a person, here are the laws of the country, respect these laws, that's not xenophobia, because the very same South African, when they go to any other country in the world, they respect the laws of those respective countries. I remember there was a clash between Basotho and Zimbabweans in one of the farming towns in the Western Cape. No one brought about the word xenophobia, but it was violent clashes nonetheless. Xenophobia is a word that is used to silence South Africans' legitimate concerns about the failure of government in managing immigration, securing the borders, and ensuring that companies are not allowed to exploit migrants by employing immigrants and paying them slave wages instead of paying South Africans. Because South Africans, when they're employed, they are going to demand to pay what they are worth. Currently, over the weekend, I read a story about in one of the factories in KZN, apparently there were 7 workers. There was a fire in that factory. 3 Malawians died, and I think 4 managed to escape, but they were badly burnt. The reason why that is so, it is because those migrants, because they are desperate for economic opportunities, they are most likely to take anything. Now, it is the companies that are going to employ migrants, and once they've employed migrants, it means those migrants will be exploited. They will be paid slave wages. That is why they were sleeping in a factory, whereas an ordinary employee from South Africa who's got rights will never be allowed to sleep in a factory. So the failures of government to deal with all of these issues is the one that other people are mischievously using, to incorrectly, label South Africans as xenophobic. Because, for example, look at what is happening in Botswana and Zimbabwe for that matter. You can't trade in some sectors of the economy in Zimbabwe and in Botswana. You can't run a spaza. You can't drive a meter taxi. You can't be involved in truck driving. But no one is calling them xenophobic. But in South Africa, they are wanting to call it xenophobic. And the reason why, it is because companies, that want to exploit migrants is using this term xenophobia so that they get to get away scot-free from exploiting migrants. Because if South Africa is the South African government can strictly enforce the immigration laws, the labor laws, it means you won't have now the private sector or the companies exploiting migrants, underpaying them and paying them slave wages, and in some instances not even paying them at all, just giving them alcohol. There are some farms whereby migrants are paid in alcohol or they are paid in food. So that is what needs to be corrected in our country, that there needs to be a new government that is going to enforce all of these immigration laws, the labor laws, so that we do not allow these companies that are causing so much tension and conflict amongst people by employing a migrant in order to pay them slave wages and sideline a South African because there's a minimum wage, there's a basic conditions of employment that those South African employees, they need to be employed by.
And another controversial question, perhaps, is the ATM has been largely associated with former President Jacob Zuma and Ace Magashule. Is there a link between these two characters and the ATM?
We've long stated since 2019 we've got no association whatsoever with former President Zuma, Mr. Magashule. There was also another assertion that Mr. Manye was formed the party, of which, those are all lies. Mr. Manye joined the party in January 2019. By that time, we've already launched the manifesto. The structures were in, our lists were almost complete. Even with Mr. Magashule, I read an article saying he even gave me, the article was saying he gave me money to register the party, whereas the money to register the party came from the members of the ATM. And I've never seen Mr. Magashule. The only time I saw Mr. Magashule was, I think, in the 2019 SONA. And even there, we were just, in a public space because it was a gathering whereby many politicians were in. I think the other time I saw him was in the IEC launch of the campaign of 2019. So similarly with Mr. Zuma. But there's one thing that maybe we need to ask maybe South Africans is to say, these allegations have been made since 2019 when we came into existence as a party. But since 2019 up until 2024, no one has produced any form of evidence, whether it's a phone call recording between me and Mr. Magashule, or a meeting with me, with Mr. Zuma, or anything, So that is why we are of the view that that lie was deliberately done in order to persuade people to reject the ATM. That is why you find that many parties, in our country, there's something that is used against those parties in order to make people to dislike those parties. But with the ATM, we're coming from society, no corruption history, no bad baggage that is following us. Therefore, they needed to create a rumor or a lie in order to make people to dislike ATM. A rumor or a lie in which almost 6 years later, it has never been backed up by proof or any form of evidence. But we want to repeat to South Africans, we've got no association with any of these characters. What we are as a party, we're a party that has been formed by predominantly the churches, the royal leadership, community organizations, all because we want what is best for the country. However, because our politics, they are personality-driven, our politics are all about spectacles and personalities. we as a party, we've always shown that we're a party that is focused on the principle. That is why we always talk policy. We've never gone to our conferences or manifestos or rallies and talk about individuals, because individuals will not take the country forward. We believe in the politics of ideas, because it is ideas on how we can resolve the problems that we are currently facing as a country that will take the country forward.
Sure. Now, as you draw to a close, you were vocal about new rules in Parliament not to disturb the president at SONA. And there's a lot of allegations facing the Speaker of Parliament. There's a corruption issue, there's other issues, but mostly how she conducts herself, the opposition is not happy about. Do you think South Africa's Parliament is becoming more and more like a dictatorship?
Yeah, the issue with the Parliament is that from a principal point of view, you've got senior members of the ruling party that are part of the executive. You've got junior members of the ruling party that are part of Parliament. Now, it is very difficult or highly unlikely for a junior member to hold their senior member, political leader accountable. So that is why you find that Parliament is basically an extension of the executive, because everything that is happening in Parliament is done to protect the executive. You'll recall when the Phala scandal came about, the rules of Parliament are very clear that the president must answer a question in Parliament. Now, we asked a question in Parliament, and the president refused to answer. The speaker, the current speaker, now ruled that the president must not answer, or it is fine even if the president did not answer. It took opposition parties to fight, in the programming committee, that the president must come back and answer a question that he did not answer, because the constitution, forces him to answer. So, having said that in mind, the ruling party is using Parliament as an institution to shield the executive from being held accountable. And some of these rules that are basically made as and when they feel under pressure, they are done not in the best interest of the country, not in the interest of emboldening accountability and scrutinizing the actions of the executive, but they are done to shield the executive from being held accountable.
Great stuff. Guys, we were joined by ATM President Zungula. Mr. Zungula, and your last words to voters, why they should vote for you?
We are a party that is formed by the people, funded by the people. People do not understand the importance of being a party that is self-funded. Just before the voting in 1994, what the beneficiaries of apartheid, or the owners of our economy did, they created conditions that actually co-opted the former freedom fighters into their system. That is why you find that the likes, many of these freedom fighters that were in prison for a very long time, when they got out, they got to live in posh houses at the time, drove very nice cars. It is because what capital wanted to do was to get them on our side, on their side, so that when they reach, when they're now in government, they are not going to use their powers of government to actually change the structure of the economy. That is why our economy has been largely remained the same since 1994 versus now. It is because in government, you've got proxies that have been co-opted by big business. We don't have independent representatives of the people. We've got representative of business. That is why the economy will never be changed under such conditions. You are going to find a minister of finance or a deputy minister of finance. Immediately they leave their ministerial position. They go, become a board member or an executive in some of these big companies simply because they are representatives. Now, it means majority of the parties that we find in our country are basically proxies or representatives of the very same companies or businesses that are making the economy to be structured in a manner that favors only them. We're of the view as a party that to change all of that, you need an independent party, a party that is not in the pockets of big business, a party that will say, let's change the structure of the economy. Let us have a state bank. Let us have more than 50% of government spending going to SMMEs. And let us make sure that we don't have the same families benefiting in the economy, and you find that majority of the people are living in poverty, whereas the economy is circulating in very few hands. But you can't do that whilst being funded by the very same companies that are benefiting from the economy. We're not funded by, by the banks. That is why you're able to say state bank. We're not funded by the companies or the companies that own mines. That is why you're able to say the ownership of the minerals must go back to be owned by the government and not be owned by the very few companies, to an extent whereby in all of these mining towns, the people that are living there, they only know poverty, they only know disease and sickness coming from those mines instead of the wealth that should come from those mines. So if people could understand the link between the party and the funder, and how some of these companies are basically investing money in these parties so that those parties represent them. South Africa truly needs a party that represents the people, not a party that represents big companies that are benefiting from the economy. So we as the ATM, we are that company. We are that party. That is why on the question of the rand manipulation, we're the only party that was calling for a full-blown investigation into the rand manipulation. We called it economic treason because that is what it is. We're the only party that says there needs to be an investigation into the unethical practices of the banks, whereby if you are black, you are going to be charged a certain interest rate. If you are white, you are going to have favorable interest rates. We're the only party that said, there needs to be the special task forces that are going to go to these places whereby there's illegal mining, there's drug dealing, there's hijacked buildings, because we are not funded by drug dealers. We are the only party that is 100% from the time we got to parliament up until now, consistently advocated for things that benefit the people. Never at any given moment we've advocated for anything that is beneficial to companies. You find many parties are going to advocate for private-public partnership. You can't, in a developing country, want to take the responsibilities of providing a decent life for all, and you want to say some of those responsibilities must be given to the private sector because the private sector is profit-driven. We are the only party that is saying the state must boost its capacity to provide a decent life for everyone, And for that to happen, it requires for us to be independent instead of us being a proxy of companies. So the main reason why people must vote for ATM is that we are a true representative of the people. We are not a proxy of any foreign agent or any foreign country. We are not a proxy of any big business. We are not there in parliament to speak something that will be of benefit to them. We are there in parliament to advocate for things that are in the best interest of the people.
100%. Now, there you have it, guys. That was ATM President Vuyo Zungula. He says there is a difference between the EFF, the PAC, and the ATM. And his police position on Zimbabwe is that Zimbabweans need to take charge of their own countries. They can't just become experts in other countries. Thank you for joining us in this episode, and we'll see you next time.